The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View, sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee. And if you want, we meet at the Crown Plaza the second Thursday of every month. And if you want to find out more information, you can go to our website at nashuagop.org.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello, and help me welcome two old-timers here from the New Hampshire Legislature, Bill O'Brien, past Speaker of the House, and Pete Silva. How you do, Bill?
Carl,
and Pete?
You said you're going to be gentle with us, but already we're old
Well,
timers.
yeah, you're done. You're not running again, and
well, I'll accept the description of a has-been, but an old-timer, that's really going too far, Carl.
Well, you're old friends anyway.
That is true.
So,
that is true.
so
that hasn't changed.
I'd like to get your opinion. I'm sure the people listening in would like to know what you thought of what happened this past legislative period.
Well, I mean, there's kind of two reactions to it. One is it's a disappointment that the people of New Hampshire turned out on a fairly active election, well-contested election, and said, we want Republican governance. We want limited government. We want fewer taxes. We want people who are going to be concerned that the money that we're giving them is being used for worthwhile things. And we want governance of the legislature in accordance with that. And they found that, one Republican representative and a few of his friends, amounting to about 10% of the caucus, gave that leadership essentially to the Democrats. So we can get by. Later on we can go and discuss why that is the case. So that's kind of one reaction. The other one is concern going forward. And, as you mentioned, I'm not running again, so it's nothing particularly personal about it, but I'm concerned that this precedent, having been established, is one that will be turned to in the future. You almost have to get a super majority of conservatives in order for people to ensure that there will be things done that they're concerned about, limited government.
That was my biggest concern, because you talk to people this day, they don't know what happened. They really don't know, because obviously the media barely reported it. And it's, as Bill said, the precedent's been set. You could do it every single time now.
Yeah.
So the Democrats don't even really have to take the lead. They can blame it on Republican leadership, which in fact it's not.
And I know one of the things that if I hadn't been involved up in Concord, but I was listening to the show, I'd be thinking at this point would be, well, great. I mean, can't you Republicans do the same as to the Democrats? And the reason we cannot is that Democrats, irrespective of the issue, vote as a bloc. It's exactly the way that Ginsburg on the Supreme Court talked about the four liberal justices now. And she gave an interview about 6 months, a year or so ago, saying that we're voting strategically now. Well, Democrats always vote strategically, no matter what the issue is. They don't analyze it. They make sure that they have everyone, and we saw it time and again, maybe except one or two reps, sticking with them. If they said to those Democrats, this time we want you to vote for Bill O'Brien, they probably wouldn't, because they view me as the most conservative member of the legislature, but they said, they go, they must know what they're talking about. They'll all vote for me.
Yeah.
And so you can't do it to the Democrats, but Democrats and faithless Republicans will, unfortunately, I think, pull this off again.
We have too many different factions, I guess, in the Republican Party. Is that what you say?
It's not so much that it's too many factions. We approach the issue of being legislators and governance and politics from a perspective of analysis. Now, you and I have talked many times about things we agree on and things we disagree on. And you and I won't vote the same, and Pete's the same way. We won't vote the same because, although we call ourselves Republicans, we come at the issues and we see different ways of approaching it. With the Democrats, I'm not sure they have a particular philosophy other than big government is better than small government, and everything should be run by experts, I guess, as best I can figure it out. But what is important is that they control government, and they understand this voting strategically, voting together, don't break unity is very important. So by contrast, I guess you could say, yeah, do we have too many factions? We have a lot of factions, but it's the nature of who we are. We discuss things. We try to arrive at what's best for the people in New Hampshire. They try to arrive at what's best about taking control of government.
The problem we have here too is, when I agreed to get back in, because he got me kicking and dragging and screaming, but one of the reasons was we were going to change the rules to go back to every other year sessions, which I've been saying all along. When you're still working, he's still working, I'm still working, he's got a brand new business he's starting, I'm running a brand new business. I'd love to go there, and you could maybe justify it if it was every other year for 3 or 4 months. Start doing nighttime sessions, like to do all dramatic things. You've got a group of people up there that, I've said this before, the scary thing about politics is if you take New Hampshire politics, we don't get paid. But what people do for a license plate and a couple free dinners a year, when you go to Washington now and you add money into that, it's a really scary mix. And that's one of the things that really upset me with, I was done after that. Once Bill didn't get the speakership, or how it was stolen.
Yeah.
You were there. You can't make it up. And I wish more people knew about what happened.
Well, so that is a disappointment. It wasn't so much a personal disappointment. I've been speaker, and you know how it is once you've been elected rep. The first time you're up there, you go, oh, what an honor. There's something, special about all this. And I'm not saying it becomes ordinary, but it becomes something you do hopefully for reasons other than you want to go around calling yourself representative or speaker or whatever. So we did have goals, and one of them was, as Pete talked about, was to make the legislature into a place that was more attractive, more of an environment that working people could participate in, whether it's evening sessions or in Rhode Island. I was looking closely at what they were doing, and they'll meet at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a couple of days a week, and go to 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so it allows people to have a job. And one of the things that's really lacking, we joke about calling us old timers. Well, I probably am still under the average age of folks who are up there.
Yeah.
And that's not to disparage them. There's a lot of good people up there, but you kind of have to be retired.
That's true.
And
I couldn't have done
not
this if I was working full time.
Not to the way you want to do it. Especially, you've been involved in leadership. If you're going to do it, especially once you're in leadership, it's hard just to go there and sit in the back of the room and, say yay or nay.
There's a lot of research work and other things that you have to, as you say, we discuss things thoroughly. And
When the frivolous bills you cut down, I use this example all the time. The state of Texas is the 12th largest economy in the free world. They meet every other year.
Yeah.
And there's other things I wanted to discuss, the caucus, if we'd gone through organization day and I'd got the speakership. One of the things I was really interested in having a discussion about is whether or not we could use a system that's used in other states where members can, as we do now, file as many bills as you want, but you have the ability to designate only one of those bills as what they call a member's bill. That has a right to go past committee, to get to the House floor, to be voted on. The rest, you have to convince the committee to get it to the House floor.
I see.
And so if you have your pet issue, you can make sure it's going to get in front of all of us.
Yeah.
But, you can't have 20 pet issues, because that doesn't allow particularly a volunteer legislature to do their job well. I practice law in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and there's a lot that isn't good about Massachusetts. But one of the things that is appreciated as a lawyer, and really indirectly I think should be appreciated by the people of the two states, is laws in Massachusetts are drafted fairly professionally. There aren't a lot of ambiguities. There's no inconsistencies between various factions. We overtax our system up here. 400 reps, many filing bills. And so it is not unusual to practice law up here and to find absolutely contradictory and inconsistent provisions, or to find provisions that you just don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
And we leave it to the judge basically to legislate around those languages.
So they had a bigger or more complete staff than drafting it?
Well, sure. They have a different approach. Theirs is more of a traditional big state approach where they, pay people to be up there all the time. I can't remember what it is, but, back when I was more involved in Massachusetts, I think they were paying even an entry-level representative $60,000 a year.
Yeah, I think it's 67.
Yeah, and I think you could be in the chair. Everybody gets a chairmanship unless you're the 5 members who everybody hates, and then you don't get anything. But everybody gets, so you get a stipend for that, $20,000 a year more for that. And then every member gets a staff. know, one or two or three, so you can have them researching
Yeah.
bills, and then
Yeah.
each committee has a staff. I mean, there's a lot to be said about avoiding that kind of an approach because
Bureaucracy,
yeah,
yeah.
because it does invite people to legislate. And I believe in what Will Rogers said: if the legislature or the Congress, he said, is in session, watch out. But nonetheless, it does allow the product to be a little bit more
I think
professional.
that happened quite a bit this year in some of the legislation that went through. I mean, well, some of the things that came out of committee or conference you couldn't even understand.
Yeah.
You wondered why they did what they did.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does need an overhaul. I don't think justifiably that the people of New Hampshire want to pay a lot more money for staff up at Concord in the State House. And so I think another way, and it's actually a more desirable way, is that we just cut down the flow of bills coming through. And if you look back in the years you've been there and the years I've been there, from my perspective, there's only probably 2 or 3 bills, and now that I'm at the end of 5 terms, I really remember thinking these were real important bills that I brought in. We'll make that decision up front rather than file over 5 years, and I can't remember how I filed, but say 50 bills, and really maybe 2 or 3 of them were super important.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they were talking about cutting back on it, but I don't know whether they just didn't get time to look through all of them. We had a hell of a lot of bills that, as you said, really didn't deserve to be brought up.
Yeah, and so let us use the committee system.
Yeah.
And so if you have a member bill, each member can get a
Right.
bill in. But then if I file a bill that goes to judiciary and it's not going to convince the majority over there to go on, then
Right.
probably it shouldn't go on.
Yeah.
And I know there's always these anecdotal stories about some bill that had only one rep in a committee vote for it. Eventually, is passed by the House. Those are few and far between, and if they're good law, they'll get done anyway.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is going to happen with this election, and who's going to, be the? Is it going to be a loss of conservative votes, or do you think that there's a rebound and the conservatives might get a lot stronger? I mean, we had a supermajority at one time.
We did, and what was important about that supermajority of Republicans is for the first time, and I dare suggest decades, you actually had a majority, just a majority of conservatives. And so I think, and this is just pure speculation, and I bet you any one of your viewers can come up with speculation that'd be as valuable as mine, but I think that it's not going to be a bad year for Republicans. Based upon the recent vote we saw for the British exit of the EU,
Oh, yeah.
I think there's comparable outrage here against large government and the bureaucrats, and I think you're going to have people turning to Republicans and giving them their votes. Where I get concerned is if we're going to continue to generate the cynicism that we've seen come up, the cynicism that in my mind results in a Donald Trump, which is people will vote for conservatives, and they either have people who take over who don't want to lose their jobs, as we see in Congress, or just don't have the courage of the convictions, and people get very cynical. So I think there might be that. There may be more, folks up there that run as Republicans and govern as Democrats.
Not, yeah. Well, I don't know if people really understand the background of some of the people that are running. That doesn't always come out in the election.
It doesn't, and one of the reasons I'm not running after 5 terms is, first of all, I don't know that I'd be as effective as I'd like to be up there. But secondly, is we ought to leave. I mean, it shocks me that I've been there 5
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah.
So we ought to leave, and I see representatives who have been up there 10, 15, 20 terms. I think one member is up to 19, 20. Yeah, 19, 20 terms. Now, one man is older than I am now, so he's in his late 60s, and he came up there in his 30s. And the problem with that is not that people may say, well, what a wonderful person to sacrifice so much for his community. It engenders an attitude that somehow you know more than the average person. You get used to using legislation and your authority and your knowledge of how government works to basically tell other people what to do, and that's not a good thing. You ought to leave for a while, and figure out how it is on the other side of those granite walls.
Do you think that the conservative organization, or should form some sort of organization to sort of promote a whole bunch of conservative candidates?
Well, I
And
mean,
we
that
have.
begs another question, doesn't it? Which is, should there be a conservative party? You know, I've
Could
often
be.
thought that the Republican Party was the conservative. I think it was the Bill Buckley used to call the Republican Party the wine bottle, and conservatism the wine. And I think, unfortunately, there's some leaks in that wine bottle. and I begin to wonder whether there's any real difference between Democrats and Republicans once you get to office holders. You know, I think my tenure up there as Speaker was sort of an unusual set of circumstances. And you know, going back to your earlier question, I'm not sure we're going to have a conservative majority or an effective conservative minority return in some years.
I think it's going to be like the reverse of 2010, where or 2012, where the Republicans stayed home. I think if Hillary truly is the nominee, why she's not been indicted yet, I don't know.
Yeah.
But if she truly is a nominee, there's just people that aren't going to vote for her. They're just going to stay home.
So you think on the Democrat side there'll be a low turnout?
Yeah.
Well, Trump has been getting more of the independents than she has, I think.
I mean,
That's
once
what-
they're head to head on each other, I mean, he unlike Romney or McCain, is going to go after her. He's
Oh,
going to
yeah.
play Smash Mouth.
Mhm.
You know, like they'll ask him a question on, you know, cap and trade or something like that, and he'll say, like, "That's great. Now answer where you were in Benghazi." And it's live TV. You can't edit that.
Mhm.
And that's what I was saying for years. You know, you guys know my whole preaching thing with PC, and as I've said to Bill, you know, if Trump does two things for me, and I see it in my lifetime, expose the media for what they are,
Mhm.
and go after this PC thing.
Mhm.
It's killing us.
Yeah,
And that's what happened
definitely.
in Europe. I'm sure in England, they just said, look, enough is enough.
Yeah.
These guys are coming in here, they're taking our social aid that we have and giving it to them.
I think that's one of the things. You know, they use this terminology of, oh, these people deserve to be treated, you know, lovey-dovey type, but they have to conform to our social activities.
Exactly.
They don't have to have theirs in play.
And so you can see some comparison, as Pete was saying, between what was going on and has been going on in the European Union to what's going on here. The bureaucrats in Brussels just insisted that member nations take their quotas of really hostile groups of refugees. And so, too, we find here in this country that despite the recent horrific events in Orlando and elsewhere, that the federal government is still ushering in 100 Syrians a day, and they can't tell you that as a matter of fact, they can tell you they can't vet them because there's no government there to tell anybody who these folks are, where they came from, what their political affiliations were. And I think what's going to happen in the end, people are going to have the same reaction as happened in Britain. They're just going to say, we don't want you anymore. We don't. And the way you do it in this country is, unfortunately, you know, we were joking, I think, beforehand about a New Hampshire exit. Well, there's not, nor should there be. This is a wonderful country. But people will react here by cutting down the authority of Washington. And so that's what I hope happens. I see in other states that they're signing legislation in which they're actively seeking to nullify federal laws that are unconstitutional. You know, whether or not that's valid, I wonder, but it's welcomed in terms of its intent.
Well, it was 26 states sued under the Supreme Court last, verdict that the government couldn't enforce those things. Executive orders are not law.
Yeah, and you know what's really outrageous about that case, and this is the one that the Supreme Court tied on it, so it upheld the Fifth Circuit decision that ordered Obama to stop his amnesty program. What was outrageous about that is the trial court judge had asked the Department of Justice attorneys when he was considering the preliminary injunction, do I need to do this? You guys aren't going to do anything. They assured him they weren't going to do anything. And then, 6 months or 6 weeks, rather, a few weeks down the line, they found that the program was going on healthy. And so we have an arrogance on the part of government. We have an arrogance, and it has to be stated when you look at the likes of Obama and Clinton, an arrogance on the part of the Democratic elite that they can ignore people, just as the bureaucrats in Brussels thought they could ignore people. And now I think they may lose this European Union experiment, and here they may lose the adherence of the people in this country to federal government action.
Only
I
one
hope
can
so.
hope.
Yeah, we can hope. We can hope.
Well, what about the state? The state needs to be a little bit reorganized. They've had a Democratic administration for a long time. And I don't know, that was one of my observations this last year, or last 2 years, is that it's terrible organization. They just don't have any control over the different departments. And they're, doing things that I know we handled in the 2011-2012 term, dealing with regulations and things of that nature, that they were going to do a whole bunch of things, and they just haven't done one of them.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely correct. And again, as in Washington, so it is in Concord, legislators don't have the courage of their convictions. When I was Speaker, we began looking at the Liquor Commission to reorganize it. We started talking about privatization. I think it was Representative Burt or Heichel, I can't remember, one of the representatives from Goffstown had a provision, legislation that included a provision that would allow liquor to be sold through supermarkets. Now you may think this is good or bad. Because I didn't come out and oppose it, the Liquor Commission tasked a lobbyist to oppose me in my reelection. And so that's a clear indication of a bureaucracy that is out of control. And if you've been up there for a while, as you know you have been, you've probably come across a number of instances where we'll pass laws and they'll just ignore the laws. Just absolutely no. Well, again, whether we pass good laws or bad laws, we are the people's representatives. The people speak through us, and the voice of the people ought to be respected. Otherwise, you have nothing other than what, again, I look to Brussels, which is a tyranny of the bureaucrats.
Well, Department of Safety, I think, is one of the ones that I've come across that runs their own ship just the way they want to run it. And then I don't know if you heard of the little problem they had. They figured out their budget and put in $350,000 for new automobiles for the state police. Only trouble is when they actually made the paperwork, they put a minus sign in front of the $350,000. So their budget had a $700,000 hole. But now they had to solve it, and I'm not knocking the way I am knocking the way they did it. But I knew they had to do it. But, there's no talk about paying it back. They took it out of the Turnpike Fund and the building for bridges and said,
Turnpike Fund's a separate entity.
That's what they took. That's what I've been told. They took it out of two
There's
different
a clear
funds.
way you solve a problem like that. Probably the commissioner gets paid $150,000 a year. So you could just add up $700,000 fairly quickly by getting rid of the people who caused
don't we
the problem.
have, or we did have, the largest per capita public employee?
I'm not sure if it's the largest, but if you look at U.S. Census Bureau figures, so anybody can look it up, you will find that on a per capita basis in New Hampshire, we have more public employees than do such conservative states as California, Illinois, New York, south of us, Massachusetts, the most Democrat state in the country, Rhode Island. If you look at state, local, school district, county, all of them, and it really is truly amazing how there is a hidden bureaucracy here in New Hampshire that really is making us into a very different state. I used to go when I was Speaker, and I'd talk about, as a youngster, I lived in Massachusetts and went to high school there and all. And it was just understood. I understood it as a little 15 or 16-year-old. If you had a business and it was portable, you moved it to New Hampshire. And that's where your businesses grew. Now it's the opposite. If you have a business, it's better to put it in Massachusetts. The taxes are less. The bureaucracy is less. You don't have a bureaucracy that is inundated with fees and fines that they're trying to impose on business in order to sustain their budgets. This is an environment that has caused the loss of the New Hampshire miracle, the New Hampshire advantage. We're back to being just one of those regular old states that has a very lackluster economic environment, no real future. Keep it up, we'll be like West Virginia in no time at all.
Well, do you think that we, by having a governor, and hopefully we have a chance of getting a Republican governor, I like to see one with a little business background. I don't think anybody who's been up there for a while has a good business background.
I'd certainly like to see someone who started a business, someone who has had to grow a business, meet a payroll. So often in the legislature we see folks, particularly of a liberal persuasion, that their closest they have to business experience is writing a grant and getting some free federal or state money, and then just spending it until the next grant comes in, and have literally no idea. I mean, it's just so obvious, Carl, when you listen to the debate that some of these people put forward to us, that they have no idea how business works, but they look at business as sort of this bottomless pot of gold that all you have to do is just reach in there and grab the nuggets and spend them on their pet projects.
It's free money, isn't it, Bill?
Yeah.
I mean, it's I wonder where it comes
I remember
from.
I was debating, Medicaid expansion is one of the issues that came up, that our Republican speaker, through his own individual vote, brought to New Hampshire. But I was debating on NPR with a Democrat representative. And finally he said, we got to have Medicaid expansion because that's federal money. What are we going to, it's $400 million a year or $400 million a year, something large. It's going to come in here. We've got to take the money. And I was trying to say, well, that money's not a gift from China. It's not a grant from Germany. It's money we're paying for. Maybe we should, stop taking it. And that was the final argument he has. He acknowledged that Medicaid's the worst way to get medical care. Yeah. You do better if you go to a hospital without any insurance than getting paid by Medicaid, because they're trying to get you out of there as quickly as possible. And I was saying, if you're going to take it, then why don't we just put the money in buckets out on Elm Street in Manchester? Yeah. We could do it in Nashua too, and just let people take it. At least we're not going to kill them while they take it. Oh well. We're running out of time. One last comment on what you see coming ahead and what you hope to see this election day? I've talked a lot, Pete.
I mean, again, it's no secret I'm with Trump. I think it's the best shot we have in a long time of fixing a lot of things I want to fix. But realistically, those are two things you can accomplish. The economy and the monster we've created, it's going to take more than one term to fix stuff like that. It's just we're so far in debt now.
Got to stop it. I like the idea of cutting out a few departments down there too. It's way over.
That's how you start.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I like the fact that I've heard Donald Trump say that he will eliminate departments. During the time that I was speaker, we reduced the overall spending of government a little over 10%. But what we didn't do was fundamentally change it by getting rid of those folks who want to spend the money.
Yeah, right.
And so, now 6 years on, we're probably at the same level of spending again, or getting close to it. So sure,
we're going over that.
Yeah, I bet. So at this point, it would have been much better just to say, you want to know what? Why don't we eliminate the Department of Environmental Services, Environmental Quality? Get rid of these departments, and it's hard for them to lobby for more spending when they don't exist.
Well, it's nice talking to you, gentlemen. Thank you for your opinions, and maybe we can at least bring you back sometime closer to the election and see what you think is happening.
Sure.
Give me a Cleveland recap.
Oh.
Yeah, we're both going out to Cleveland.
All right, we'll have a recap. And thank you all for listening in. Remember, this is sponsored by the Nashua Republican City Committee, and look at our website at nashuagop.org. Thank you very much for listening.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.